65% of our kids in the country don't really understand what they're reading. Are we going to be focusing on politics or are we going to focus on that? I think that's when you go into Latino kids, that number goes to 72. That's an old metric as well. That's prior to the pandemic. So the number right now, it's gonna be shocking. So are we gonna continue having conversations about politics, or are we going to start helping this kids?
Hey everyone, my name is Kyle Walgren, and yes, this is another episode of the Business of Education. Today, our guest plays in a space that I'm very passionate about. Children's literacy is something that I think we need to focus on more. Her name is Trini Bensusan Mille, and I know I
There
just
you go.
mentioned that, but Trini, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm really excited to be here.
I was super pumped when you said you'd come on, just because children's literacy is something that's super important to me. When I was talking about how to pronounce your last name, you went into Latin America traditions. Where are you currently in Latin America? Are you in the U.S.? Where are you out of?
Right now, I'm in Miami after living most of my time in the Midwest or New York. But I'm originally from Argentina,
Okay, that's super cool. And then, so you first generation immigrant, second generation.
first generation.
Okay,
So
I moved to the US
I'm
7
ground
years ago.
zero.
I'm always fascinated on how long people's families have been in the US. It's one of my I don't know, I just fascinated by it. TeeRead is the company. It's a AI speech recognition tool designed to help teach kids read English, but also learn English as a second language, I'm
Correct.
assuming.
Yeah.
What made you want to get into that? Because your career comes from, a different space. You were with American Express before, L'Oreal, all amazing companies. Why would you want to jump into your own business, especially education? One's so tough.
Well, I always say that when I started TeeRead, I didn't tell my parents for like 3 months because I thought they were going to have a heart attack. They didn't, thank God. But I did start my career as a teacher. So the first job that I had to pay college was to be an English teacher in my neighborhood back in Argentina. Primarily, again, I always say I don't know how I got that job because I had no credentials whatsoever besides being the oldest one of five siblings and 25 cousins.
Oh,
And the fact that I had lived in the US, in Minnesota, when I was like in high school. And so my English was quite good. That was basically all that I had to teach kindergarten. And it was by far the best job I ever had. But ever since I was really little, something that always pushed me was this feeling of how can we provide real freedom. And so I was absolutely obsessed with economic freedom. Okay, so how can I make enough money so that I don't have to depend on anyone and I can make my own choices? And even though I love teaching, I knew that teaching English in Argentina wasn't going to make that dream come true. So I ended up working in all these amazing companies and, working a lot. And I would say I worked in places where you work until 3 a.m. without like blinking. I've never been as tired as when I was a teacher. Like there's nothing that compares, even though I was working almost no hours as a teacher in comparison. There's nothing like teaching, and that has always been something that I wanted to go back to in some capacity. So uh, when I was doing my MBA, I did some research on how do we help migrant children um, like actually come and be able to read English and understand it. When I was doing my MBA at Northwestern, I saw that we could do a lot more with that, and a couple of years later, I started to read.
when with your approach to TeeRead, you're using speech recognition. Tell us what the user experience would be like, just
Yeah.
for those who don't know what TeeRead is.
Yeah, we use a lot of AI and speech recognition. So the way that it works is that we identify how much English the student actually knows. And
Hmm.
we don't only focus in reading, we focus in reading, we focus in writing, speaking, and listening, all the major skills and vocabulary. So we have our assessments, and that's where we use a lot of speech recognition because our assessments are not just multiple choice questions. Because Kyle, like when it's just multiple choice, it's not really engaging and we're not really getting to the core, the truth behind what the student is experiencing.
Right.
So what we do is we have those assessments, we identify the gaps, we match them with a personalized coaching sessions to help them with an intervention get better and improve their English skills.
No, that's awesome. Did when you first came up with the concept, was your goal to go direct to consumer? Was it to go down the B2B path? I have my own experience in the ed tech space, so I've changed my mind 100 times. I'm just curious.
Yeah. I think what you just said is quite normal. I also changed my mind like a million times. But to be honest, the when I first came up with the concept, it was pro bono research. I wasn't even doing it to make it a business. I honestly like I was doing my MBA. I finally had I had a bunch of offers to start a new job when I graduated. All of a sudden, I didn't have any time. I didn't have to do recruiting anymore, so I had time for the first time in my life. And I said, what do I do with this time? I'll do research. So I was extremely lucky that I got to work with one of the best professors at Northwestern. And with her, I did all the study on understanding, hey, what is actually going on? What is the literacy crisis in the US in such a horrible condition, especially when you look at Latino students?
Hmm.
And from that research, I just took it up, did an amazing, my specialties in strategy and branding. So I took it out, did an incredible presentation. I presented to some of the biggest companies here in the US. And they all said like this is really great, but the technology is too much for what we have right now. I've been talking about AI since 2018.
Okay.
And after that, after a few years I started TeeRead, and I knew it had to be B2B to really make the impact. The problem with B2B is that it is lower than B2C.
The I feel like there's a lot more hurdles when you're selling to B2B, um, but the cost of customer acquisition, I've learned from my
Yep,
experience, is a little bit more affordable when you go to the B2B route.
absolutely.
The are so is your platform a native app? Is it a web-based platform?
Both.
Okay.
So we have both a web platform and our Android and iOS platforms for mobile. But we do, and this is a big, big part of how we like our theory DNA, is we
Mhm.
design everything for mobile first. The
Okay.
reason why we do that, and Kyle, I bet you had to go through this question as well. It A lot of investors and people were really challenging me on this because it might not be the best business solution because a lot of the schools actually use Chromebooks,
Mhm.
so they don't really need a mobile phone. But to me, it was extremely important that every student would be able to access T-Read, especially in situations where they might not have an amazing device in their homes or even in their schools, but everyone has a smartphone, at least one smartphone in the household. So that way, we were ensuring that we were accessing and providing access to all the students.
That was kind of my thought process when we were building out our first product. I just automatically assumed that everybody in the world had iPhones. Boy, was I wrong. But, you know, I believe that it's important from a user or product experience to really understand the level of value the native products can have, and then
Mhm.
understanding, in my opinion, what you're letting go for a sense of quality by moving to a web app. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the thing The reason why we design everything for mobile first is because it's a lot easier to take what you have optimized for mobile and bring it to a web experience because you have more stuff. You have just a lot more space to work with. So
Hmm.
it's a lot easier to take what you're doing with mobile and take it to a web-based app than the other way around. So it was imperative for us to start designing first for mobile and then for web.
The did you always have a background in technology, or was technology the direction that you wanted to go? I know that you said you started off as a teacher. Um, do you consider yourself a technical founder, non-technical founder?
That's a very good question. I've always been a little bit of a nerd. And a little bit weird. So I am the kind of person that was reading and like getting all the information in technology just as a hobby. I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a technical founder because I feel like my CTO is a million times better than I am, but I can definitely hold my, like actually get the job done if I needed to.
That's awesome. The I see you're wearing a Techstars shirt. Did you guys come through Techstars?
We did. We were part of the first program of Silicon Valley Techstars last year.
Okay.
And we were the first cohort. It was definitely an experience. It was really cool.
Talk to us about that experience in itself. A lot of people looking into getting into technology. Um, how would you recommend something like that? There's Techstars YC is another great one.
Hmm.
Uh, what would
Yeah.
you say to new
So,
getting into the space?
so we were extremely lucky that we were part of an Amazon program. Again, one of the best experiences I had so far has been with the AWS team. They chose us from thousands of teams to be part of the Impact Accelerator. And when they chose us, they gave us besides a lot of funding, they also gave us an entire technical team, an entire business team to help us walk through different issues that we were facing at that moment. And at that point in time, we were experiencing one of the biggest, uh, change in growth,
Hmm.
to the extent that our servers collapsed,
Oh wow.
because we were getting so many users using our platform at the same time. And of course, with one at that time, we were starting to have acquisition requests. And one of the things we were never interested in an actual acquisition, but you always have to listen to the offers, right?
Right.
And at that time, I remember they looked into a platform the day our servers collapsed. And I was like, this cannot happen again. It's my good name that is being trashed right now. And of course, besides the fact that a lot of our students were not being able to go into the platform. So that's exactly when the AWS team chose us and they helped us arrange the whole program and make it extremely, extremely scalable. And through them, I got to meet the Techstars MD of that time for Silicon Valley, who is Colin Wallace. Colin Wallace, he's also a Techstars and a YC alum. He was the one that created his startup that was acquired. Well, they merged with Grubhub.
Hmm.
Um, Basically, the patent that he had done was the architecture behind the back end for Grubhub that you see today.
Okay.
And when we met, he told me like you have to come. Uh, you're going to benefit significantly for an experience like this. And truth be told, I did. So he invited me to be part of Techstars Silicon Valley, and that was an amazing decision that we made. And we got to meet incredible founders and a bunch of amazing mentors that are still my mentors today.
So you said this was in 2018. Did I hear that correct?
No. Techstars was last year. It was
Oh, Techstars.
2023. So Q2 of 2023. The Amazon program was Q4 of 2022.
Okay. And then, so working with Amazon, obviously they're building up you so you guys can scale. Obviously, they want you to be operating across many different server platforms. The more you
And a
grow,
lot of countries.
it is, right? A lot of different countries. What were some of the biggest challenges that you ran into before you had that assistance from Amazon, and how important is it to build on a platform like Amazon, and why?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial. And to be fair, Amazon, there's a bunch of things and support that you can get from AWS. Same with Google. I do like AWS a lot from my previous, the previous jobs that I had. I always had a pretty great relationship with AWS, so I knew what I was getting myself into.
Mm-hmm.
And there are different services that you can get within AWS. For example, there is a service where it's really not that much money, and you always get someone to answer all of your serving like server questions. That being said, I've always been super lucky that the team that I put together, we have a really big network because I am a big part of the tech community. So I have a lot of friends that were, lending me a hand and helping me out even before we had the AWS support. But if I wouldn't have had that, I think AWS has a pretty good way of helping you out.
Yeah, AWS is a great system, and they do have lots of startup, especially in the edtech space. They have the
Yeah. John
start.
Boyden, I don't know if you know him.
I don't.
Oh, you should definitely meet him. I can put you in touch. He leads the like edtech startups at AWS. And he's truly fantastic. And again, like they try to create a support system for startups, especially in education, as much as possible.
Yeah, the first time I heard him, I think the program's called EdStart, right? If I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
correct.
Yeah,
Thank you. I couldn't remember the program.
yeah, it's great, and the team's great. AWS has been great, and they do have credits for young startups they're looking to get going. So
Yeah.
it is a great direction to head. Um, when we built our company, I was completely naive and blind to what I was getting into. So I never even knew what a cohort was, or a accelerator, or any of that stuff. So when I
Boy, did you learn.
I did learn, when I finally like woke up and realized I needed to bring in like stronger people into my community. I reached out through a program called Mentor Cam, which is a YC
Mm.
company. Um, but the person that I ended up mentoring with is uh, another YC alumni, and he's been a world of wealth. We've accelerated so much faster after bringing somebody with that experience into our community, and he's helped me hire, and looked at our deck and helped us raise money, and it's just been so valuable. I could never thank it enough, and I do think that every young startup need to look at it for sure early on. And I've said even later in the date, or later in our stages, do you think I could still value from this? But it's moving so fast that it would be hard to pause now to go really do that right. Um,
Yeah, I would say so. The thing is, the accelerators, it's actually funny because I take it kind of like the other way around. To me, it was even faster than being normal. If you're doing it, in my opinion, if you're doing it in a very conscious way, if
right.
you
No, that
know why you're going. So like whenever I do a program, I actually get a lot from programs, and I go with a hypothesis. So what is the one thing that I want to get out of this, of the time that I'm investing here? What is the one question that I want to solve? And then they basically are giving you an entire, support system to get to that question, to get to that answer as fast as possible. So, but at the end of the day, what you're saying around mentorship is the most important thing. There's nothing like mentorship when you're building a startup. And the more mentors and advice that you can get, the easiest it is, because it's a lonely process as well.
Very, very lonely. Um, Speech recognition, especially with kids, it's a challenge.
Yes, yes.
What have been some of the biggest setbacks going through that route? What are some of the biggest challenges that you guys have had to overcome?
Background noise, real classrooms. That is definitely the biggest challenge for anyone that is trying to implement something that uses this kind of technology.
Right.
Again, it's a lot easier to just do a multiple choice and call it a day. But if you want to get to the root of the problem, speech recognition and using AI are absolutely key. In our experience, the thing that we had to deal the most was, okay, how this is going to be used in real classrooms and in real homes where there's going to be noise. The kids are going to stop reading what they need to be reading out loud and start talking to their friend. So there's going to be a lot of interruptions. Okay, how do we deal with that, and make it so that we get the final result, the final outcome? And for that, we tried many things. We're in a really good space right now, where there's different filters and different things that we check for, before the student starts recording and after the student starts recording, even in the middle. So with that, that has been absolutely key. But at the beginning, it was hard because we knew that that was not going to be something we could control.
Right.
The noise in the classroom.
Was when you dove into speech recommendation or speech recommendation engines, did you know where you wanted to start? Was it a trial and error?
It was a trial and error. So, like, for sure. And we were looking at different ways of doing it. How do we control the different variables and change the different variables to get the highest accuracy number that we could consistently throughout time and throughout. And remember, Kyle, a big part of what we do is deal with students. Like, most of our market is for students for whom English is not the first language.
Right.
So you have to add the variable of an accent.
Right.
So how do we help with pronunciation as well? How do we identify what the student was trying to say to help them get to that point where they can be understood? So it was a whole thing we had to work with. We had to work a lot, and have as many different accents on our database as possible to identify, like, be able to work with a broader set of accents as possible. So our first school, for example, was in Queens, where the student body spoke over 44 languages in total.
Yeah, New York's big. The amount of different languages is crazy. And then one of the questions, I'm sure, you're trying to solve everything, and it's English and Spanish are primary languages. Can you expand into these Spanish languages? And then where do you draw the line, right? Do you all of a sudden have
Yeah.
44 different language models within your platform?
No,
Or, you know what I mean? Like,
no.
constantly, how do you avoid product creep when you're trying to serve such a large community?
Well, the thing is that the service itself is helping them learn English. We're not helping them learn Spanish, for example. But one thing that we need to take into consideration is different sets of people that are trying to learn the language. Because even with Spanish, it's not the same teaching English to an Argentinian. It's an extremely different accent than someone from Colombia, for example. Colombia is one of our biggest markets. We're signing deals with the government. That's a whole different beast, than a kid that lives in New York, who just came from Ukraine.
Mhm.
Like, to give you a sense, like, that is extremely different. So we need to be able, but the final product is the same one. So the product creep doesn't really intervene as much, but we need to have as many people talking to our platform with different accents to ensure that our accuracy rate is as high as possible.
No, that makes perfect sense. And then do you So when you're selling, so teacher buy-in is always hard when you're selling into a school, right? They're
Yeah.
overworked, underfunded. And then it seems like teachers sometimes want to poke holes and make things make believe there's something there that's not. And I'm sure you've done this. I've dabbled in speech tech a little bit, but they go and try and trick your technology, and then come back and be like, "Oh, well, look at the accuracy rate. I can, fake the word sad when I should have said said, and it didn't read it properly." How do you get around that teacher buy-in around speech tech being so
Yeah.
new? You're still, if you look at the top speech techs like Azure or Google, they still have like a 14-15% error rate. How are you explaining that and getting the buy-in, knowing that there is an amount of error, and some of these concerns that teachers have are false positives? What's
Yeah,
that like?
that's a really good question. At the end of the day, Kyle, it all ends up being about how much pain these teachers are suffering and what they're willing to do to, uh, you know, get it over with. So that is, and again, our main market today is Latin American schools and schools here in the US that need help with their English as a second language students. Those teachers have a huge problem. There are no teachers that teach English in Latin America. They're very, very few for the demand that exists. Ever since the pandemic, the demand for English language learning in Latin America has doubled. It's extremely clear that you do not get the same level of opportunity if you do not know English. So parents are desperate to have their kids learn it. And when you go to the teachers here in the US, the districts do not have many English as a second language teachers, and they don't know what to do, especially when they have students from different parts of the world. So you have to have a teacher that is able to speak Spanish, that is able to speak um, Chinese, that is able to speak Arabic. It's almost impossible, right? So then this criticism goes down, and there's a lot of things that we do within the platform to show the teacher, hey, if you don't agree with this, here's how you can flag it, and you can change it yourself. And teachers are willing to do that again because the pain is so large that they're not just trying to poke holes anymore. But yeah, I completely see where you're coming from. Because I get it, right? Like teachers want the best for their students and they're not going to accept anything that is not going to help at the end of the day.
The thing that you said that was interesting is that Colombia is one of your biggest markets. When you're raising money, the from my experience, your investors always
Hmm.
want to make sure that you're uber focused on a certain demographic, certain location, certain problem.
Yeah,
You guys are still early. You were in Techstars,
last year.
last year, and you're already expanding nationally. How'd you pitch that to them? And get them to buy in, knowing like, hey, we're going to expand globally really quick here.
Well, it was actually the other way around. My pitch was we have to go to Colombia and we start from there and then we expand to the US. We first started in the US and we did a pivot right around when we were going to the Amazon program to focus primarily in the international market and focus primarily in Latin America. Why? Exactly because of what you're saying. We need to be focused and the market opportunity in Latin America is so significant, and there is a need for something that is combining the technology and the knowledge from the market, the knowledge from the Latin American market, and that has been a game changer for us. So I like what you're saying is exactly right, but it's kind of the other way around. Instead
Yeah.
of saying from the US, then we expand internationally, it was like no, let's refocus internationally and in certain markets first to then come back to the US with full force.
That's an interesting approach. You look at companies like Elo or Amira who've all focused on, you know, US economy first. And then I think Elo or Amira is starting to make like a big play in countries like India and stuff like that. Um, but it's interesting that you did it vice versa.
And
The
it's a hard market as well. You have to have a lot of knowledge of the market before you make that jump. We
one
actually got requests from India and we decided not to go there.
the one thing that I think would be challenging in India is, the current the cost of the dollar compared to what cost of speech is, right? Speech technology is
Yes,
not cheap. And
that's correct.
so when you're doing something like this now, obviously all startups know that they're going to operate a loss right now, but how are you like easing concern around pricing to the schools and places that you're going into? Because like I said, edtech or speech technology is expensive.
It is, but we're also our profit margins are significant to the extent that we are comfortable not charging too much. Like we have optimized, especially because our market is Latin America, right? So you can't charge way too much. So the way that we do it is we have optimized experience as much as possible to ensure that we can have a good pricing model at the same time ensuring that the results are going to come in. Because of course it would be ideal to get the student to be talking nonstop, but that would require an investment that is not is just not something that it's going to be efficient for the parents or for the teach for the school system in general. So we have carved a very amazing middle point between the two things.
One of the other questions that I find my mind wandering to is content in today's society is, crucial. Our kids have
Yes.
access to so much different content,
Yeah.
and reading, I feel like is one of those things that can fall on the back burner pretty quick.
Hmm.
How are you guys deciding on which content to use and keep kids engaged? You know, what are you learning there?
Well, we have a whole team of teachers and educators and specialists, like English specialists,
Hmm.
that take a look at our content before we publish it. On top of that, we have a whole system where the student is rating the content that they're exposed to, and the teachers are rating the content that their students are being exposed to. So with that, we try to bring the best materials into the hands of the student and have control mechanisms put in place to ensure that that continues throughout time. But yes, that's a big, big thing, and that's one of the things that I always wonder with just putting AI everywhere. We're very thoughtful of how we use AI, and we have worked so much to put so many control mechanisms behind our artificial intelligence. So when the student is using it, they're not just encountering things that they shouldn't be encountering or biases that they shouldn't be encountering as well.
So interesting. The one of so my mind's going a million miles an hour just because I know that like when you look at the problems coming from like Latin America to the United States, content is dramatically different. We've focused on this. I'm going to use like the word equality within content within the education system here, where that's not so accepted, in Latin America. If you're following what I'm saying, how are you going to transition? What's your plans to transition into American style content when coming into America, but also being able to, does that make sense?
I don't really see a significant difference
You
between the
know?
content. Um, no, especially what our educators. If we have schools that want to have content that is not showing the values that we have, we're not working with those schools, and we have had said no to schools that do not share the same value system that we do. So that's a big part of what we do. Most of our content is developed here in the US, as a matter of fact. So
I love
it's
hearing you
not
say that.
something.
There's been this huge content war within schools when you look at like what's approved content in say a conservative state towards a democratic state, and I feel like, countries outside of the United States would probably follow a more conservative type content platform.
There are certain topics that we have made sure that if there's something that needs to be talked about, But in reality, we work very closely with our schools, and we need to share the same value system to ensure that this that the content that they're seeing. I know that there's a lot of big conversations here in the US, and there are conversations that need to happen. But we try to make sure that, again, our focus at TeeRead is to expose children to different parts of the world, to STEM as much as possible, to technology as much as possible, to different sports. So our focus and our goal is to open their minds into what the world offers instead of just focusing on conversations that are not ours to be made at this
I
point in
love that
time.
answer. I really do. And I love that you've said no. I learned today from another guest that came on the show that no is a full sentence, and I thought that that was just like the best line I've ever heard.
That's a very good line. No, it's a full sentence.
Yeah, I was just so amazed with it. She was an edtech founder that is using gamification to increase self worth in young kids. I just felt
I
like it
love
was
that.
an amazing, amazing mission.
Well, social emotional learning, we have a lot of books about can we identify our emotions?
Mhm.
Like, but again, why are we do not take it to a political stage. That's something that we made a decision not to do because it's not our place in either side of the political spectrum.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you want to tread, or that from our experience, we try and tread lightly. And I do talk to a lot of like education leaders in the space, and um, a lady that is an amazing lady. She's been on the show. She's been in ed tech. She's a VC. Rita, her name's Rita Ferrandino, and I know I just butchered that too, but she's an amazing lady. And I asked her, I'm like, how do you stay apolitical in this space? You know, because we don't want to lean with the different demographics between, especially with what's going on in the election right now. You don't want to seem as if you support one side and lose a whole group that you could help impact. So it's been very challenging navigating, right down the middle. So I'm glad
I
that.
think if we focus on the things that we do really well, what is the things that I am passionate about and that I feel I wish every student would have access to is, hey, learn about technology, how things actually work. Can we learn more about like physics? Can we learn more about different parts of the world and different cultures? Can we learn about STEM in general? Can we learn about how to identify our emotions? Things that are going to be helpful no matter where you're born, who's your political leader, or who are you following, or what religion do you have. We are not interested in getting in the middle of those conversations that are
That's
not mine to lead at this point in time.
No, thank you. That's so awesome to hear you say that. Just because I feel like a lot of people feel like they need to dive into that, and that's always been our stance on it too. I want to be in the middle, and I just want to help kids, and I feel like I can hear the passion in your voice, and that's why you're doing.
65% of our kids in the country don't really understand what they're reading. Are we going to be focusing on politics, or are we going to focus on that? I think that's when you go into Latino kids, that number goes to 72. That's an old metric as well. That's
Mhm.
prior to the pandemic. So the number right now, it's gonna be shocking. So are we gonna continue having conversations about politics, or are we going to start helping this kids? And well, I focus now in Latin America, but this is still a big conversation to
But
be
you're
had.
coming this way, and you're definitely coming this way. The AI in let me back up actually. COVID and T reads. Did it help you? Did it not help you? How'd you navigate
We
that?
started in COVID, so it's that's what I'm saying. I had an amazing job with an amazing leader, an incredible team, and I quit to do something like TeeRead, right? To help children. That was not my one of my biggest mentors told me, Trini, you're never gonna be able, like, people are not gonna be hiring for years. And I said, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyways. It was the best decision that I've ever made. Um, but COVID did help us. The way that it helped us, especially in Latin America, is that there has been an opening to new technologies, an opening to, hey, what happens if this happens again, to blended learning. So there's definitely been a shift that we took advantage of. But we didn't took advantage as other companies out there who were active prior to the pandemic, and all of a sudden, during the pandemic, they skyrocked.
Yeah,
We didn't have that
you
happen to us.
you clearly know the players in the space, and I feel like Amira, one of those players that was perfect position, perfect timing, and just took
Yeah.
off. Another one was Caribou during COVID,
Yes.
just took off. Uh,
Caribou was a big one.
I think were like voted the number one most downloaded reading app of 2022. And then they've actually exited. So Rita was one of the advisors for um, Caribou as well. So she's just a world of knowledge. But uh, if somebody wants to get in touch with you and get on TeeRead, how do they do that?
Well, you can always reach out to me at Trini@TeeRead.com. And, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm always receiving, it's actually interesting because I've gotten some of the best advice and ideas from people who have seen me talk in different podcasts, or AWS calls me a lot to talk in different panels, and I've gotten the best advice from those. So I'm always open to having conversations, and I do get a lot. I do mentor a lot of people, primarily women from Latin America. So if you're listening and you want to start a company and you're a woman from Latin America, I definitely want to help you. So talk to me.
I will definitely make sure that we put a soundbite together for that, and we'll make sure we put your information together. The question I end everything with, or every show with, is how important has your network been in the growth of your company, and how do you leverage it? And give this piece of advice to a new founder coming into the space that's really lost looking on how to grow.
There is nothing like a network. Nothing more important than the network. This is a lot of work. It's a lonely space, and you need to go fast. And in education, you can cut corners, so you need to be very, very thoughtful.
Mhm.
So, at least in my opinion, my network has been absolutely crucial. I got my network from anywhere. I didn't have a network when I started. I asked all of my friends to begin with to introduce me to all the teachers that they knew here in the US. Every friend of a friend of a friend, I kind of stalked a lot of my mentors and begged them to talk to me. And some of them did. And again, 3 years later, they're still some of my most important mentors today.
Mhm.
Another thing that I do recommend is to write a newsletter and keep everyone on the loop. I gotta say, I'm not amazing at that. I should be better.
I'm 7 days
Um,
late on mine, right? It's the 7th.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But it goes
But that, in my opinion, that has been the best. And also try to get into other founders' newsletters, because not a lot, not you're not presenting real information that you're not going to, that you're not okay for anyone to just copy paste and send it to someone else.
right.
It's not your investor letter; it's your newsletter to your community. And I love receiving my founder friends' newsletters as well, because I know what they're doing. And all of a sudden, I think, oh, wait, Kevin could really benefit from this is something that he's struggling with. He could really benefit from talking to my friend that does this. So I'll connect him. So don't think that your network has to be amazing investors. It can be a lot of other people that just want to be part of your story.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. Trini, I had a blast. I've got a million more questions. I'm going to follow your journey. Literacy is something that I'm passionate about, and I can't wait to see where you guys go with this.
Thank you, Kyle. Same here. I'm super excited about it, Soma, and I'm here anytime you need me, and can't wait to see this posted at some point.
Okay. Thank you. Talk soon.